My name is Arya Solis, 22 years old. The natatorium smelled like bleach and nerves, a rectangle of impossible blue holding 8 lanes of breath and ambition. Devin had shaved his arms last night while I read splits off his whiteboard, both of us pretending the math mattered more than the noise inside our heads. Now it was finals. 8 months of pre-dawn alarms, chlorinated hair, and pasta dinners boiling down to 1 minute where the world would be stopwatch-shaped. Dad and I stood in the stands, our voices shredding the same syllable, go, 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 until my throat was raw. Devin's cap flashed past, our family name scrawled in black Sharpie like a small promise that we belonged to one another. That's when Bree slid into the empty seat beside me, as if summoned by my joy. I didn't hear her at first, just felt the cold of her presence, then the damp press of her shoulder. When I turned, her mouth was smiling, but her eyes weren't even in the same building. "You need to stop," she hissed, barely moving her lips. "Stop what? Cheering for my brother?" My laugh came out thin. Her fingers clamped around my wrist, polished nails biting half-moons into skin. "Stop acting like you own him." For one split second, I thought she meant the meet, the night, the shouting. Then I realized she meant Devin. "Bree, he's my—" I started. "I've seen the way you look at him," she said, and her voice had that high, steady pitch people get right before they decide a lie is oxygen. "The way you text him. The way you're always around." I tried to pull back. Her grip tightened, a bracelet turning tourniquet. Dad saw the freeze climb my face and was there in 2 strides, his hand warm on my shoulder, his body on instinct. "Everything good here?" Bree's smile widened exactly 3 millimeters. "Great, Mr. Solis. We were just chatting." Security noticed the cluster before Dad could. The usher touched Bree's elbow, words gentle and immovable. For a second, she didn't move, just stared at me like I was an animal that had forgotten my place in the food chain. Then she let go of my wrist and let herself be escorted out, voice rising as she went. "She's trying to steal him," she cried. Heads turned. The butterfly leg of the medley surged. The whistle bleated. Bree's words hung crookedly in the humid air. Devin won his heat, a perfect slide of hand to wall that triggered a small earthquake on our side of the stands. The scoreboard flickered his name, then his time, and all I felt was hollow, like I'd cheered the echo of something instead of the thing itself. Dinner afterward should have been champagne and fries and the noisy relief of ordinary victory. Instead, Devin apologized for Bri while cutting his burger into quarters like he could manage the night if he managed the geometry. "She's stressed about college apps," he said without looking up. "I talked to her. She didn't mean it." "She grabbed me," I said. I didn't show him the half-moons in my skin. I wanted him to believe me without evidence. "She told me you grabbed her first," he said, and his voice was careful, like balancing a tray you don't own. Dad set down his fork. "Security escorted her out," he said. "We saw it." Devin shrugged a shrug I'd never seen on him before, one that said, "I heard you. It doesn't fit my plan." "She'll apologize," he offered, as if that were a spell that turned events into opinions. I went home, chalked my wrist with arnica, and told myself the word for what had happened was weird, not warning. The text started at 12:11 a.m. Unknown numbers that weren't, not really. Home wrecker, obsessive, stay away from my boyfriend. At 12:18, a different number. I know what you're doing. Everyone will. At 12:26, a photo of the back of my building at night, brick and a single kitchen light that was mine. No caption needed. I blocked, then blocked again. New numbers bloomed like mold. At 1:04, you breathe too loud when you sleep. I stared at that one until it blurred, then turned every light in the apartment on and slept on the couch with my shoes by the door. The morning tasted like pennies and caffeine. At the coffee shop where I picked up a weekend shift, Bri planted herself in the back corner, hands around a cup she never drank. She didn't look at me for the first hour. The second hour, she didn't look away. When my manager handed me the new schedule with shift leads scrawled at the top, someone had already been to my locker. The smell hit first, iron and dust, then the shape, a small bird, all wing and no sky, arranged on my folded apron like punctuation. The note under its feet read, "You don't deserve anything." I typed a text to Devin with shaking hands and deleted it. I typed again. "We need to talk." He replied, "Later." Later turned into after close, after mop, after I counted the drawer twice because numbers were the only thing in my day that made sense. I told him everything I could fit between breaths. "She says you're making it up," he said when I finished. "She has screenshots." "Of what?" "Texts from you to her." He stared at my face like a lie detector that wanted to pass me. "They're pretty bad." "I didn't write to her," I said, "ever. She said you were jealous of us, that you wanted to come between—" "Devin," I said, tasting my own name in a place it didn't belong. "She grabbed me at your meet. She sat in the shop all day. I found a dead bird in my locker." "Security told me you grabbed her first," he murmured, eyes sliding toward the wall. "And the usher wrote that you said she was in your seat." "So now there's a file," I said, and my laugh ricocheted off symbols in the air where it had no business being. "I'm just trying to understand why she would lie," he said. And there it was, the question that makes people drown slowly. Why would someone do that? As if intention matters more than harm. "Because she wants to own the story," I didn't say. "Because she likes the way it feels when my name makes you wince." At home, my phone chimed with new friend requests from accounts that looked like mannequins. No posts, no faces, no history. Anonymous pages bloomed with photos of me at the register, at the bus stop, at the diner last week with my roommate. Captions bent the angles. Obsessed, emotional incest, always watching him. It was like someone had taken my life and printed it on funhouse mirrors. 2 of my college friends muted me. 1 sent a question mark and nothing else. I changed my number. I walked different routes. I learned to love the clack of a deadbolt. Bree's escalation didn't look like escalation. It looked like patience. She started standing across the street from my building, motionless under the streetlight, hood up, phone in her pocket. I called the police twice. The operator's sigh sounded tired of men in general. The officer who came out checked his palm for the policy script. "She's on a public sidewalk," he said. "If she doesn't make a direct threat." "She asked if I breathe loud when I sleep," I said. He shrugged, like a man who'd signed up for car thefts and got hearts. "Document everything," he said. "If she says something explicit, we can act." Devin stopped answering my midday texts. He answered late at night with one-liners that sat there like doors I couldn't decide whether to open. Mom said it was drama. Dad said couples fight. I said I was scared and watched their faces pass the fear back and forth like a hot plate. The breaking point wasn't a scream or a siren. It was a window and a hinge, and me forgetting the boring holiness of locks. I came home after close, and something was wrong in the air. A shift in the dust, an off-key chord. The bathroom window stuck when I tried to shut it, and I told myself it had been like that yesterday. It hadn't. She was sitting on my couch holding my childhood photo album. The blue one with stars on the cover and Devin's smile on every other page. "These," she said, voice calm as prayer, "should have been pictures of me." My phone was in my back pocket. My hand went there. Her hand got there first. The phone shattered against the wall with a sound I'd remember later when surgeons said words like sternum and near miss. "He doesn't need you anymore," she whispered, stepping into my space. The album clutched like a baby. "He has me. But you keep getting in the way." I ran. She caught a fistful of my hair and yanked, pain exploding along my scalp like a hot crown. The struggle was stupid and animal, elbow, heel, breath, and then I was free, sprinting down 3 flights, banging on Mrs. Lynn's door because light was on and maybe she'd open on instinct. I slept in a hotel with fluorescent blankets and a door that locked and eyes that burned from a kind of crying. I hadn't practiced since I was 12. The next morning, I walked into the courthouse with a folder I didn't know I'd been compiling. Screenshots, timestamps, the usher's name written on a napkin, the bird note in a clean Ziploc. The judge's lips went thin by page 3. By page 5, she said granted and handed me a paper with a weight the air recognized. When I served Devin the explanation he hadn't believed from my mouth, he finally believed on paper. He broke up with Bri. She violated the order and spent a weekend in a cell. I set my phone face down in a quiet apartment and let my lungs figure out how not to count the seconds between every sound. I thought the water had stopped boiling. Then the email arrived with no sender name and a subject line that felt like a match. He chose me. The attachment was a photo of a positive pregnancy test. The hand holding it had the same polished half moons I still carried faintly on my wrist. Below it, a screenshot. Devin's name, Devin's worried words, Devin asking if she was okay, if she needed anything, if they should talk about what happens next. The timestamp was 3 days old. I forwarded it to him without a caption. My phone rang before the whoosh of my send finished sounding. "It's not what you think," he said. I almost laughed. "Then what is it?" "She says she's pregnant. She says a lot of things. If there's even a chance." "If there's even a chance, you get a paternity test," I said. "You don't have secret conversations with the woman who smashed my phone and stood under my window and called me a thief for loving my own brother." Silence stretched so thin I could hear my building settling. "I knew you'd react like this," he said softly. "Like what? Like someone you didn't believe until a judge told you I was real? That's not fair." "None of this is fair," I said, and hung up on the echo of my own voice in a room I used to trust. The apartment hummed. Somewhere a pipe knocked. I sat on the floor with the album she'd handled and felt every picture tilt on its page. When I finally slept, my body did it like a decision. The restraining order felt like a door closing. For about 12 minutes, my nervous system believed it. Bree treated the paper like weather, annoying, but not personal. She hovered at the edges of my life, learning the routes I walked, the nights I worked, the hours I left lights on just to pretend I wasn't timing the darkness. If the order was a line, she learned to stand with her toes just behind it and smile. The day after the judge stamped granted, a new account tagged my friends with photos of me at the coffee shop, cropped tight, filtered cooler, captions heavy with inference, always watching, she can't stop. Ask her brother why. When I reported it, another one bloomed. Same palette, same punctuation. Devin kept saying, "I'm dealing with it," like he could open his hands and catch fog. Mom said, "Couples fight." Dad said, "She'll get bored." I said, "I'm scared," and watched the sentence land nowhere. At the shop, someone left a second note in my locker. "You don't deserve him either." Either. Either what? Either who? The math of it made me dizzy. The police kept saying the same sentence in different uniforms. "She's on a public sidewalk." As if concrete were a permission slip. As if the law were more allergic to bruised feelings than bruised bodies. I started a folder on my laptop titled Camera Roll and fed it everything. Timestamps, screenshots, the usher's name, the precise angle of Bree's head in the shop. I didn't know what would matter later. I knew something would. She escalated the way mold does, quietly, efficiently, in places I thought were clean. Anonymous emails to my manager with screenshots of messages I'd never sent. "I'm obsessed with him. You don't know what sisters are really like." A whisper network I couldn't hear started humming in spaces I used to feel welcome. 2 college friends stopped replying to my texts. When I cornered one gently at a farmer's market, she said, "It's just a lot, Aria," and ducked behind a stall of peaches as if I were the sun. The bathroom window broke the story. I came home late, the kind of tired that makes you generous with denial. The window was open, just a hair, like a mouth surprised. I told myself I'd left it that way. I hadn't. The floor lamp was on. I hadn't left it on. The air tasted faintly of someone else's perfume and old paper. Bree was on the couch with my blue photo album in her lap. Her legs were tucked under her like a child who belonged. She didn't look up when I walked in. She turned a page. "These should have been pictures of me," she said, voice calm as a documentary. My phone met the wall and lost. She stepped close enough that I could count the tiny opal flecks painted into her nail beds. "He doesn't need you," she whispered. "He has me." The words smelled like mint. "But you keep getting in the way." Fight or flight isn't a metaphor when it happens. It's physics. I ran. She caught my hair. My body remembered old drills from swim dryland, rotate, strike, torque. And I slipped free, pounding down the stairs in socks, palms skidding against the banister, my breath already dialing 911 in shape, if not sound. The hotel room was loud with safety. I slept like survival and woke like paperwork. The courthouse was quieter than fear. Fluorescent lights hum the same in every building that holds rules. I set my folder on the counter. The judge didn't need me to cry. The documents did it for me. The order came with a number and language that made intent finally less interesting than distance. When the process server handed Devin the explanation of what I'd been living, I watched his face do something I hadn't seen in months. Change. "I'm sorry," he said on my stoop, hood up against a rain that wasn't ambitious enough to be weather, and I wanted it to be enough. In some small way, it was. He ended it with Bree that afternoon. She violated the order by nightfall. texted congrats on breaking up a family, and sat in her car across the street like a punctuation mark. The police took her in. A weekend in jail, an ankle monitor, a court date that folded itself neatly into calendars that didn't have my shaking hands on them. On Monday, my inbox pinged with no sender name and a subject line that read like a dare. He chose me. The attachments were a collage of new weapons, a pregnancy test, 2 pink lines like an equal sign, a screenshot of Devin's gentle questions. If there was even a chance, his messages said, he needed to know. I forwarded it to him because some stories should be told by their own parts. My phone rang. He said, it's not what you think. I said, then what is it? He said, what if? I said, paternity test. He said, you'll always react like this. I hung up on the way my heart tried to throw a chair. The next morning, Mom called with the voice she uses for company. Smooth, rehearsed. Your brother wants a family dinner, she said. Just us. Is Bree going to be there? Of course not, she said, and I could hear the part of her that wanted it to be true. I went because hope is stubborn. I went late because dignity is too. The table looked the same as every birthday we'd ever eaten at it. Dad's steaks fanned on a platter, Mom's salad too fancy for our family, Devin scrolling, thumbs moving like he was trying to text a future that wouldn't embarrass him. Who are you talking to? I asked, sitting down. No one, he said. Work. Don't lie to me, I said, and Mom's eyes did the thing where they asked me to be less myself at the table. Dad cleared his throat. The room rearranged around the sound. We need to discuss the situation. What situation? I asked, because names matter. Bree reached out, Mom said gently, like placing a fragile thing on the table. There's a baby. The fork sounded louder than a fork should when it hit ceramic. She violated the order to tell you? I asked. And you rewarded it by replying? It was one message, Dad said. She wants to do the right thing. The right thing would be leaving us alone, I said. If the baby is Devin's, Mom began. If, I said. Big if. They can test in pregnancy. She says that's risky, Devin said. She says, I repeated, and the air in my lungs turned into a noise I barely recognized. She says a lot of things. She apologized, Mom said, eyes wet now. She says she's in therapy, that she had a break. Good for her, I said. That doesn't rewrite my timeline. You're being selfish, Devin said, standing so the chair squealed. There's a baby involved. There's a pattern involved, I said, standing too, and you're still failing to see it. Dad told me to sit. I told him I was done sitting at tables where my safety was a debate. I left. No one followed. The house looked smaller in the rear view, or maybe I did. 3 weeks without my family sounded like quiet and tequila. Tessa slid a margarita toward me and said, You look like hell. And I laughed like it was the first honest thing anyone had said in a month. I told her everything. The meat, the album, the paper, the baby. She listened like friendship is a job you want to be promoted at. They're insane, she said when I ran out of verbs. Document everything. Don't run. If she violates, make sure it sticks. That night, an envelope was taped to my door in handwriting I could have picked out of a lineup of 1,000. Inside, a sonogram. Underneath, cursive neat as a threat. His daughter. Due, March 15th. Hope you'll be a good aunt. The officer took pictures and a note. Get a camera, he said. So I spent rent money I didn't have on a doorbell with a view. 2 nights later, at 2:47 a.m., she stood in front of my door in a hoodie, face tilted up, the camera's infrared giving her eyes an animal gleam. She didn't knock. She didn't leave anything. She timed herself to exactly 7 minutes, like ritual. I sent the clip to the police, to my lawyer. I did not send it to Devin. He showed up at my bar anyway, ordered a Coke like we were 12 and hadn't learned that sugar can't fix anything. The baby's a girl, he said, in case you were wondering. I wasn't. I saw the video, he said, picking at the paper straw wrapper. Mom showed me. The cops asked if we'd seen Bri. She came to the house. Mom invited her in for coffee. I put the bar towel down because otherwise I was going to tear it in two. Of course she did. She seemed different, he said, and the hope in his voice embarrassed me for both of us. She apologized. Therapy, meds, everything. What changed your mind? I asked. I asked her about the footage, Shamim, he said. She said it wasn't her. Said you were making it up to turn me against her. He huffed a laugh with no air in it, and I realized she hadn't changed. She'd just gotten better at pretending. He apologized then, for not believing, for loving badly, for not loving the right person loud enough when it counted. I let him. Sorry doesn't fix it, I said. A paternity test might. Next week, he said. She finally agreed. Text me the results, I said. Don't call. 8 days later, an unknown number delivered a sentence I didn't know where to put. Not the father. She lied. Relief didn't come. Validation didn't either. Something like clarity did. People like Bree don't stop. They pivot. At 5:41 a.m., my phone rattled itself off the table with Mom's calls. When I answered, the world narrowed to the shape of her breath. "It's Devin," she sobbed. "He's in the hospital." "What happened?" "Bree," she said, and I didn't need the rest. The ER was all light and noise, and the grotesque choreography of crisis. Dad's hands shook around a styrofoam cup. Mom's mouth was making prayers it hadn't practiced since she was a child. "He's still in surgery," Dad said. "They don't know." He folded the rest into his chest. The detective took my folder like it was a life raft. The surgeon came out with eyes like someone who fights time for a living. "He's stable," she said, and my bones almost liquefied from the relief. When Devin woke, the first thing he did was make a joke about my hair. The second thing he did was say, "You tried to warn me." The third thing he did was squeeze my hand, hard, and not let go. Outside his room, a television with the sound off showed Bree's booking photo and the word alleged, like the world needed to be polite to monsters. I pressed my forehead to the cool hospital glass and didn't cry. Not because I was strong, because I was building the next folder in my head and I needed to see. Devin stayed in the hospital for nearly a week. 7 days of antiseptic mornings and cautious smiles, of my parents tiptoeing between guilt and relief. The air in that place clung to us, thick, sterile, and heavy with what-ifs. The police called it attempted murder. Mom called it a tragedy. I called it inevitable. When Devin finally came home, I thought maybe things would get quieter. They didn't. They just changed pitch. 2 months later, we were sitting on the back patio, the one where Dad used to grill and where Mom still pretended everything was normal. The yard looked the same, but the energy didn't. The house felt smaller now, like it was holding its breath. "I got another letter," Devin said. I froze mid-sip of my coffee. "From her?" He nodded. "Prison mail. I didn't open it." "Good," I said automatically. "You shouldn't." He sighed. "I told the warden to mark me as refused correspondence. But it keeps happening. Different handwriting, same obsession. She's apologizing, then blaming, then apologizing again." "You told the police?" "They said unless she threatens me directly, there's nothing they can do. Freedom of speech doesn't end at a cell door." I laughed, sharp and bitter. The system loves loopholes. Devin didn't answer. He just looked out toward the fence, where the paint was peeling in long strips. "She told me once," he said, "that she never learned the difference between love and possession." "She still hasn't." He nodded slowly. "I just don't get it. How does someone convince themselves that hurting you is proof they care?" "You don't need to understand her," I said quietly. "You just need to keep your distance." He smiled sadly. "I did that once. She found me anyway." We went back to therapy after that. Family therapy this time. A requirement from the victim recovery program, but also something we needed, even if we didn't want to admit it. The first session was awkward. The second one hurt. The third cracked something open. "I enabled her," Mom said one night, her voice trembling. "I thought if I stayed neutral I could fix it all, but all I did was make you both feel alone." "You wanted peace," I said, "but you bought it with my safety." Dad put a hand on her shoulder. "We failed you both. I should have taken that first police report seriously." Devin nodded, staring at the carpet. "We all wanted the easy version of the story, the one where she was misunderstood, not dangerous." The therapist, kind, patient, deliberate, wrote one word on the whiteboard: denial. Then under it, "What does it protect you from?" No one spoke for a long time. Months passed. Bree's trial ended with a 25-year sentence. No parole. The prosecutor said she showed zero remorse. The judge said she was a danger to society. I didn't go to the sentencing hearing. Devin did. When he came back, his face was pale but calm. "She didn't look at the judge," he said. "She looked at me. The whole time." "She always did," I whispered. For a while, we all tried to live again. Devin started working part-time at a gym, easing into normalcy, like someone testing water that might still be boiling. Mom started volunteering with a domestic violence shelter, teaching women how to file restraining orders correctly. Dad stopped pretending everything was fine. He'd sit with me sometimes in the kitchen, coffee going cold between us. "She fooled us," he said once. "But you saw her from the start." I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. Then came the second set of letters. This time, they were for me. The first one arrived in a plain envelope. No return address. The handwriting looked familiar but shaky, like someone learning to write again after years in the dark. I almost threw it away. But curiosity is a dangerous kind of gravity. I'm sorry, Arya. I'm getting help now. I see what I did was wrong. I just want to understand you. You're the only person who ever really knew him. Please write back. I burned it in my sink. The ashes clung to the porcelain like fingerprints. The next week, another one came, then another, each one darker than the last. You ruined us. He still loves me. He just doesn't know it yet. I'll get out someday. I stopped checking my mail myself after that. Devin did it for me. A year after the trial, he met someone. Her name was Tessa. Yes, my Tessa, my best friend. The same one who had held my hand at that bar and told me to keep fighting. At first, it scared me. It felt too soon, too strange. But when I saw them together, I realized it wasn't wrong. Tessa wasn't a replacement for what he'd lost. She was proof that he could love again without bleeding for it. The first time he brought her to dinner, Mom cried. Dad grilled steaks. And for the first time in what felt like forever, the air around our table didn't feel like a battlefield. We talked about normal things, movies, work, Devin's physical therapy, the future. For once, I didn't look over my shoulder. But normal never lasts long when your past knows your address. 3 years after Bree's conviction, the phone rang again. Unknown number. Is this Arya Solis? A woman asked. This is Officer Patricia Vance from the State Correctional Facility. I'm calling to inform you that prisoner Bri Callahan has been released early due to prison overcrowding. The world tilted. What? She was sentenced to 25 years. Yes, ma'am, but due to good behavior and policy changes. She stabbed my brother 3 times, I interrupted. I understand your concern. She's under strict parole conditions, ankle monitor, mandatory therapy, and a no-contact order with you and your family. My hands were shaking. No contact orders didn't stop her before. If she violates any of the conditions, she'll be reincarcerated immediately. If she violates them, I repeated, not before. There was a pause on the line. I'm sorry, ma'am. I'm just calling to fulfill victim notification protocol. Then she hung up. That night, I couldn't breathe. Every sound in my apartment was a warning. The pipes knocking, the elevator groaning, the streetlight flickering. At 2:33 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I told you he chose me. Now it's your turn to see what that means. I stared at the words until they blurred. Then I took a screenshot and called the police. They traced the number. The parole officer said Bri claimed her phone had been stolen. The officer believed her. 5 days later, my windshield was smashed in. The police said it could have been random. 2 days after that, someone left pink roses on my doorstep. The same kind Bri used to send herself and claim were from Devin. A week later, my boss pulled me aside. Someone called, he said. Asked for your schedule. Said she was your sister. I don't have a sister, I whispered. That's what I thought. He looked at me, serious now. Be careful, Arya. I filed every report, every smashed glass, every flower, every phone call. Each one added to a growing stack of proof that the system still didn't believe danger until it was loud enough to echo. But by the time it did, it was always too late. And that night, it almost was. The sound of breaking glass woke me. At first, it folded itself into the dream. Waves, thunder, applause. Until the next sound came. The soft crunch of shoes on tile. My body knew before my brain did. Someone was inside my apartment. I reached for the phone on my nightstand with one hand and the aluminum bat I kept there with the other. The voice that came next turned the air inside me to glass. Arya, Bree's voice, soft, almost tender. I know you're awake. I can hear your heart. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. I dialed anyway. 911, what's your emergency? She's here, I whispered. Bri Callahan. She broke in. She has a restraining order. Stay on the line. Officers are on their way. I could hear her moving through my living room. Slow, deliberate, humming under her breath. A song I recognized. The one Devin used to play on road trips. Every step she took felt like a countdown. The footsteps stopped just outside my door. I've been thinking about this moment for 3 years, she said through the wood. Every night in that cell, I imagined what you'd look like. The girl who stole everything. My boyfriend. My future. My life. I pressed my back to the wall, the phone still clutched to my ear. You did that to yourself. Her tone hardened. You convinced him I was crazy. You made him choose you. He chose the truth. The doorknob turned. The cheap lock rattled. I backed toward the window. Bat raised. The police are coming, Bree, I said. my voice steadier than my pulse. "You'll go back. You'll never get out again." She laughed, low, guttural, the sound of someone who'd already decided the ending. "Good," she said. "Let them come. Let them see what you made me do." The door burst open. She stood framed at the doorway, a silhouette cut by the streetlight behind her. Prison had changed her. Her hair was shorter, her eyes colder, her body leaner, sharper. In her right hand was a knife. "I loved him," she said, stepping forward. "And you turned him against me. You took everything." I gripped the bat tighter. "You broke into my apartment. You terrorized me. You stabbed him. You destroyed yourself." She took another step, the knife gleaming. "You had him first," she hissed. 18 years before I even knew he existed. You were his everything before I had a chance to be anything. That's not fair." My throat tightened. "He was my brother." "Exactly," she said, smiling. That same terrifying, childlike smile I'd seen the first day in the stands. "You had him first." And then she lunged. Instinct did the rest. I swung the bat. The crack of aluminum meeting bone rang through the room like thunder. She screamed, dropped the knife, but didn't stop. She came at me again, clawing, grabbing my hair, shoving me back against the wall. We fell together, limbs tangled, furniture crashing. The knife slid under the dresser. Both of us saw it. We scrambled for it, her hand slick with blood from her shoulder where I'd hit her, my heartbeat a roar in my ears. Sirens, close now. She heard them too. For 1 second, her grip loosened. I shoved her away, kicked the knife farther. She stumbled to her feet, blood on her arm, on my floor, on her teeth where she'd bitten her lip. "This isn't over," she said, voice trembling but steady. "It's never going to be over." Then she ran, through the living room, through the jagged mouth of the broken window she'd crawled through, gone before I could stop her. The police arrived 30 seconds later, guns drawn, lights flashing red and blue against the shattered glass. By then, I was sitting on the floor, shaking so hard I couldn't hold the bat anymore. "She's gone," I managed to say. They swept the apartment, cataloging chaos, the broken lock, the knife, the blood trail leading to the fire escape. One officer knelt beside me. "You did everything right," he said, his voice soft. It didn't feel like I had. The paramedics cleaned the cut on my arm from where she'd grabbed me. Someone took photos. Someone else bagged evidence. But I wasn't really there. I was still in the dark, still hearing her voice whispering, "You had him first." They found her 2 days later at a bus station trying to cross state lines. She told the arresting officers she'd just needed air. When they checked her bag, they found my mail, my spare apartment key, and a handwritten list of addresses, mine, my parents', Devin's. She didn't even try to deny it. The second trial was shorter than the first. The evidence was overwhelming. Violation of parole, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder, again. This time, the judge didn't bother hiding her disgust. "Ms. Callahan," she said, "I don't ever want to see your face in my courtroom again." She sentenced Bree to 40 years. No parole, no early release. Bree didn't cry, didn't plead, didn't even blink. She just looked at me, that same hollow, obsessive stare that had haunted me since the swim meet, and smiled. Not a broken smile, a promise. After the sentencing, I walked outside into the sunlight. The courthouse steps were crowded with reporters, microphones thrust forward, questions about justice and closure. I didn't stop. There are no neat endings when you've lived in someone else's obsession. Only survivors. Devin met me by the car, his arm still stiff from the scars she'd left. "Are you okay?" he asked. I nodded. "No, but I will be." He reached for my hand and squeezed. "She can't hurt us anymore." I looked up at the courthouse behind us, at the place where her smile had lingered in my mind like a stain. "Yes," I said, "but she'll try." In the weeks that followed, I realized surviving isn't the same as being free. I still checked every lock twice before bed. Still startled at the sound of glass breaking on television. Still flinched when someone said her name. But something inside me had shifted too. I refused to live like prey anymore. So I did what she never could. I built something from the wreckage. Devin and I started a support group for people like us, victims of stalking and obsession who the system had failed. We met twice a month in the back of a community center with coffee that tasted like cardboard and chairs that creaked when you leaned too far. The first meeting had 4 people. The second had 12. By the third, we had to move to a bigger room. People came with stories just like ours, restraining orders ignored, police reports filed and forgotten, Lives broken because someone decided love meant ownership. We listened. We believed. We helped each other plan ways to stay safe, to stay sane, to stay alive. And for the first time in years, the word family meant something again. 5 years later, I met someone. His name was Callum. He was kind in the quiet way that doesn't need to announce itself. He didn't flinch when I checked the locks 3 times. Didn't tease me for needing to know where he was or when he'd be home. He just texted, "Home safe, love you," every night. We got married on a beach at sunset, no big crowd, just us, Devin and Tessa, Mom and Dad. When I walked down the aisle, I wasn't thinking about what Bree had taken. I was thinking about everything she hadn't. My voice, my love, my life. Those still belonged to me. When I woke the morning after the wedding, sunlight cut through the window like something brand new. For the first time in years, my body didn't catalog exits before it cataloged beauty. Callum was still asleep, face half buried in the pillow. I watched him breathe, slow and steady, and thought of how rare it was to find calm that didn't demand you prove you deserved it. We spent our honeymoon in quiet ways, reading, walking, touching the water just enough to know we could trust it again. Devin sent a photo of Mom and Dad babysitting his kids, both toddlers covered in spaghetti sauce. "Real chaos," the text read. "The good kind." I smiled until my cheeks hurt. A week later, a letter arrived from the prison. Same block handwriting, same postmark. I didn't open it, neither did Devin. We'd already instructed the facility to mark her correspondence refused. They could shred every word before it reached us for all I cared. Some stories don't need a sequel. The support group kept growing. We called it Second Voice because that's what every survivor needed. Someone else to say, "I believe you." By year 2, we had chapters in 3 cities. Devin ran the outreach. I handled the stories, helping victims document and protect themselves. Each meeting reminded me how the system loves paperwork more than people, and how much power there was in survivors helping survivors. One night, a woman stood up, trembling, and said, "You're the reason I didn't give up." I told her, "No, you're the reason you didn't give up." But later, alone in the car, I cried anyway. Because healing wasn't a finish line, it was a language I was still learning to speak. Time moved differently after that. Mom and Dad aged in the kind way. Softer edges, gentler words. They apologized less because they didn't need to. They showed up instead. Devin married Tessa on the same beach where Callum and I had. His scars had faded into silver lines on his chest, the kind you have to know are there to see. When he danced with me at the reception, he said, "You realize she doesn't live in my head anymore." "Who?" I asked. He smiled. "Exactly." A year later, a journalist called. She'd heard about Second Voice. She wanted to write a piece, not about tragedy, but about what came after. I hesitated. The idea of letting strangers dissect my worst years made my pulse quicken, but the thought of one person seeing themselves in my story kept me from saying no. The article ran 3 months later. Front page. My face beside Devin's, our names finally linked to something other than fear. The headline read, "Siblings Turn Trauma into Advocacy, How They Stopped Hiding." Beneath it, resources for survivors, hotlines, legal clinics, addresses of shelters that actually answered their phones. The phone at Second Voice rang nonstop for a week. People didn't just want help, they wanted hope. The morning the article went live, I got an email from a stranger. "I read your story. My daughter's going through something similar. No one believes her. Thank you for showing me how to." I read it twice, then 3 times, and felt the strange, quiet relief of knowing that something good had finally been built on the ruins. Sometimes I still dream about her. Not the knife or the blood, just the stare, the belief that love and possession were synonyms. But when I wake now, I don't check the locks first. I check the window for light. It's always there. Every anniversary, Callum and I drive to the beach. Devin and Tessa bring their kids. My parents bring too much food. We sit in folding chairs and watch the sunset smear the water in gold. Devin's daughter, Emma, once asked, "Why do we come here every year?" He looked at me, and I nodded for him to answer. "Because," he said, "this is where we remember what we survived and what we built." Emma thought about that for a while, then said, "So it's like a birthday for brave people." And maybe it was. When people ask if I ever feel safe now, I tell them the truth. Safety isn't a location. It's a practice. It's a choice you make every day when you decide to live anyway. Because Bri took a lot from me. My sleep, my trust, my quiet. But she didn't take everything. She didn't take my family, she didn't take my love, and she never took my life. That belongs to me. It always did. I just had to survive long enough to claim it.